What's going on, beautiful J4 family and community? Apologies, apologies, apologies. One of my beautiful sons came over with his lady friend, and so I had to delay the broadcast and spend some time with my seeds. So apologies on that. Thank you guys so much for joining me. It's been a little bit since I've been on here, so I wanted to kind of come by and continue a conversation in the black and biracial space. It's been a fun subject matter for me, very interesting. I'm learning a lot, and hopefully, I'm sharing some decent content in this wonderful process of moms and dads being highly intentional in raising grounded, healthy, solid, independent sons. That's what this channel is about. So, welcome. If you guys are just joining me, please feel free to let me know who you are, where you're from, and particularly what's your status. Are you interracial marriage, mom and dad, and you got some sons and daughters, or monolithically black, and you're just wanting to be a part of a community that's strategically talking about how we as parents can be intentional in creating experiences and opportunities for our boys to help them in this beautiful transition into adulthood. So, by way of introduction, I'm AJ, your moderator. I'm a part of a J4 Conversations. There's four of us, two dads and two sons, but a lot of the most recent content has been solo dolo, a chance for the old man to positively occupy his time as I'm dealing with empty nest syndrome here. And so I'm experiencing this YouTube streets and having some fun while hopefully, processing things out loud that are from both my life lived, but also my work and my passion points. By way of introduction, I'm a biracial kid. My dad is a Creole man from New Orleans, a black man married to a French European woman. That's my mother. And for much of my life coming of age, the question of identity was critically important to me. And as I stated in previous shows, I decided to immerse myself in the blackness, particularly at the dawn of college. And much of my worldview has been shaped by those choices made as an 18-year-old. Although I will acknowledge, beautiful family, that the community of biracial folks are growing, they're evolving, they're asking different kinds of questions, and they're asserting themselves from an identity construct in different kind of ways that were unfamiliar to me, but ways that are also fascinating to me. So much respect to the community. This also pertains to my work, Black and Biracial Boys Transitioning into Young Adulthood, a rites of passage program. I'm literally saying, moms and dads, think about intentionally putting your sons and daughters through some formal rites of passage initiative, and it will absolutely help as they sort of are going through their coming of age process. But I do a lot of work with the high school age set as well as collegiate set, particularly football, and then to some capacity at a lower extent, professional ranks. Just having conversations with young men in this critical age of 15 to 26, which is defined as the warrior class, where they're dealing with things from a physical mindset. Their peer standing is critically important to them. Sex is on top of their mind. How they rank among groups and how they have a sense of belonging are all critically emphasized and heightened at that particular age set. So it's important that we insert as families, as parents, something intentional in there to help them navigate all these different growth dynamics and developmental dynamics towards an outcome that lines up with the family values, whatever the case might be. But on a macro level, the reason I'm committed to this personal passion project is because too often when I'm working with young men, they come from single parent homes. That's a problem. 51% in our community, the African American community, are born to single parent homes, compared to 25% as an aggregate, as a national data set. And I want to see that decrease. And if I can play this small part and have a conversation with young men coming of age around intentionality in the fatherhood space, intentionality in the marrying space, and just being understandably, impulsive at a beautiful young age of development, but simultaneously having absolutely to prepare for a future adulthood. And so one of my undergirding messages is to encourage beautiful young men to make a baby out of preparation with someone they prepared with, rather than impulsivity and midnight passion. So this is likely going to be a three-part series. today I'm going to kind of give context to what a rites of passage is, what purpose they serve, and then also the initiation ceremony component as a second component, and then the third one talk about mental and physical challenges that you could put your beautiful sons through as a way of gaining a heightened sense of self and sort of a clarity. So the reason this is important, beautiful family, is because America rewards new rights and primarily as an outcome of age. Let me say that again. America, because of its size, some 350 million people, because of its size and its breadth and its capacity, it normally gives rights based upon birthdays. Okay, it gives rights based upon birthdays because, as a social construct, the broader society does not prepare the transition from youth to young adulthood in any formal kind of way. It cannot. It's just too large. It's too many people for them to have a controlled, structured kind of environment to put everyone through a rites of passage program. So some people never experience it, but yet they continue to come of age and they deal with sort of milestones based upon their own psychological development, but there's no real readiness for it. America again grants new privileges not based upon evidence of mastery or readiness, but based upon birthdays. So this session examines a rites of passage model, one that can be done by families. You can do it. That can be facilitated within the family unit and is aligned to parental values. Okay, it's aligned to parental values. However, you feel you should raise your black son or your biracial son, whether they identify as biracial or they identify in a black cultural space, whatever the case may be, whatever your family values are, you can orient your rites of passage program to fit within as an extension or an affirmation of what you believe as mama and or daddy or mama and daddy. Okay, but it is ultimately designed to identify to create identity affirmation and personal esteem among your sons. So let me underscore here, beautiful family. You can do this. Just like I talked about in the previous session around mantras, names, and hairs, you can create mantras, you can create family prayers. You're intentional in how you name your babies. These are decisions that you make, and these are completely within your purview and control and manifestation as a family unit. You do not have to think that this has to be assigned to some external kind of ordained or authoritative kind of entity. There are things you can do right within the spaces of your own home, right? So I'm inviting us to sort of challenge rights associated by age set, but to do it so more intentionally through a family unit and a communal nuclear effort, right? So just to kind of stress the age set, at 5, what can you do, right? The country in its educational model then sort of has the formal beginning of public education or private education at 5 years old, right? 5 years old. There aren't really too many other age sets that affirm a new rights until you get to 15 and a half. 15 and a half, you can get the permit, right? Then there's a 6-month preparation to drive a 4-ton vehicle. And then at 16 is the first age that you can then take and pass the driver's test. And all of a sudden now you can drive a car, right? The next thing in the broader society is R movies. R movies, you're permissible to go to an R movie by yourself at 17. Prior to that, beautiful family, you have to drive the car that you have a license for, but you got to take your mama with you so that she can buy the R ticket for you. So, a little silliness. But then the seminal act of age is 18. 18 sort of gives you a sense of high independence. You are able to sign your own documents. You're able to go to the military. You're able to do things of adulthood. You go from a juvenile offender at 18, and then you're more so considered an adult. So, based upon age, says the society kind of assigns different kind of privileges. 21 years old, what can you do? You can purchase alcohol, you can go to the club, right? So again, just underscoring and emphasizing America anoints new privileges and rights based upon birthdays with no real evidence of mastery or readiness or a demonstrated capacity that you can handle the newfound rights that you've received. So we have to think about as families, think about as mamas, think about as daddies. What do we want our children to become? What do we want our daughters to become? What do we want our sons to become? But in order to do that, we have to sort of take some leadership in creating something formal that typically has challenges in it, it has rituals in it, it has expectations in it, and then it concludes in some kind of ceremonious way where a person realizes that they started at a certain level of readiness. They go through a process that's managed, that's monitored, that's kind of operationalized, and then when they went through it, they come out different. They come out a different human being because they experience something in a process under the guiding and loving hands of the love source, mom, dad, or if you bring in someone external to help manage the program. But rites of passage programs have clear beginnings, okay? It has a duration of time that there's activities and expectations that are articulated. And then when they're done, when they've completed it, they should have grown, they should have affirmed themselves in the lessons that you taught, and they should be different and be granted certain rights and privileges that make sense within the family construct. Okay? So, a rites of passage program essentially, especially for biracial kids, give them an opportunity for identity clarification. Again, based upon parental values, whatever you think about race, whatever you think about culture, whatever you think about what your child ought to have leanings for and identify, as parents, you have the responsibility to set that in motion. Now, at some point, they'll come to their own conclusion as to where they will land. Racially, they're biracial, but culturally, where they ultimately land. But that will come initially through a catalyst. It'll come through a prompt. It'll come through a sort of push in a certain kind of direction that largely will come from the loving source figures in mom, dad, or close nuclear relatives. So within the context of biracialness and certainly blackness, a rites of passage is a critical opportunity for identity formation, to become a part of a community, to connect with their peer groups, but also elders uh, in that community, right? And so it gives them an identity affirmation, immersion into a community, also chances to practice character, right? Chance to practice character, which is critically important to healthy, solid, grounded adulthood. And then also gives them a chance to create accomplishment, right? And out of accomplishment comes confidence. There's tasks that are a part of rites of passage programs. There's rituals. There's things that your son will need to do. And after they've done them, whether they did it begrudgingly, reluctantly, or enthusiastically, they would have gained accomplishment. And accomplishment is the precursor to confidence. Okay. Accomplishment is the precursor to confidence. So, and then finally, the rites of passage program introduces them and it begins to familiarize them to adult subject matter. Okay. A rites of passage program is an intentional previewing of what they are to expect, have to navigate, what they have to sort of manage in order to be successful adults. It introduces them to sort of adult themed matters. So, for example, it talks about self examination, right? To initiate, to evaluate the outcomes of whatever you initiated, to create a plan of re-engagement of action, to go back in seeking success or improvement, and then to re-engage. This is a constant process of self-examination. Initiate, evaluate, plan, re-engage, right? You can assert these kinds of values or lessons within your rites of passage program. Other adult themes, financial literacy. Okay, you can put subject matter in front of them that plant seeds in sort of a fiscal responsibility, but also fiscal risk taking in healthy kinds of ways. And you can provide vocabulary and explanation into healthy fiscal literacy just to plant those seeds at very young ages. And then also even more heavy, sort of profound adult themes around relationships, dating, courting, ultimately marriage, certainly parenting, caring for elders, adult type expenses, and those kind of things. So a rites of passage program again takes a young person who's still coming of age, still impressionable, still willing to listen, still willing to humble themselves, puts them through a process that has an extended duration of time and activities and expectations. Then it culminates with celebration and assignment of new age kinds of responsibilities and privileges, but it also clearly is defined with them at the center, right? them as the core audience of love pour in under guidance, but also them as the subject of attention, the subject of development, being led by parents. Parents, regardless of your educational status, and regardless of your class status, regardless of your work, whatever the case may be, you can do something like this within your own nuclear kind of family. Now, there are spaces where formal rites of passage programs do exist. They do not exist as an aggregate of the entire society, right? But they do exist in pockets and at varying levels of formality, okay? So the military will certainly be a rites of passage program, but that won't happen until your son or daughter is about 18. They're legally of age. I'm recommending a rites of passage program occurs much earlier than that while they're not fully developed or at the dawn of legal adulthood at 18. But the military is an example. To a lesser extent, sports can have that, right? There's a clear beginning. There's a season that's highly physical and arduous in terms of its training. It has mental elements tied into it as well. Then there's a conclusion of the season that's typically celebratory. And on the back end, they might come out somewhat different physically or gain a sense of accomplishment, and that correlates to confidence and pride. But again, not structured in the way that I'm referencing in recommendation. Which within religious institutions, there are rites of passage programs. The Mormons sort of come to mind. That's a heck of a rites of passage program where you train and educate and teach your young people how to manage in different kind of cultures, and then you send them out to do missionary kind of work. I'm not necessarily an advocate of that, but the concept of preparing your young teenager to then move them out into the broader society where if they fend for themselves based upon a particular belief and ideology, and then they go do that for a duration of time, and then they come back vastly different than when you sent them out. And the community ultimately is probably better for this preparation process of their boys to eventually come back into their religious institution and take on various forms of leadership and membership. Gangs have elements of rites of passage program, largely rooted in physicality and behavioral kinds of things. It doesn't have the element of leadership in positive kinds of ways. Or the difference between a gang and an organization is that one typically moves towards its mission, which arguably has at least a written positive purpose, versus one organization has an element of crime or criminality built into it. But they have forms of rites of passage programs. My rites of passage program was a fraternity. I'm a member of Alpha Phi Alpha, a black fraternity. I started when I was 19. I went through a 6-week process. I began in a certain kind of way. I had a duration of expectations that I had to learn. I had to articulate to give it back. I had to endure certain kinds of challenges. I concluded with high celebration, and then I was granted rights and privileges of having went through the process by becoming a formal recognized member. That was my journey into rites and passage programs. And then lastly, sometimes there's Mason organizations, Elks, those kind of things, or, maybe at even a lower age, the martial arts. Martial arts can kind of play a sense of having to confront one's fears, gaining confidence and skill sets and elevating what you're capable of doing, what you're capable of enduring, representations of your mindset of an internal kind of discipline with reward and then privileges that come with those rewards. So there are rites of passage programs, beautiful folk, in the broader society. Those are things that you can plug your sons into. But for purposes of part one on leveraging rites of passages for the development of Black and biracial boys, I'm recommending that you all consider doing it as a family, okay? That you consider doing it as a family. And I'm recommending you think about the age of 15, okay? 15 is a very unique age, particularly in boys, because that is the height or the onset or the immersion of puberty. Puberty will happen a little bit earlier for young ladies, but for boys, 15 is kind of the age that's assigned with puberty. They are already going through tremendous physical change in their body and hair and zits and getting funky and Their penis is on their mind, right? They're already going through a physical kind of metamorphosis process. This is a perfect time to also get in front of them to sort of help shape things that are kind of nurturing their mind, their emotion, and not just what their body's doing physically. It is also the time when a first major act of independence is something they become obsessed with, which is the driver's permit, ultimately leading to the car. To do a rites of passage program at 15 before they get behind the wheel solo and independent in that very dangerous thing, that very potential destruction machine, if they're too impulsive or wilding out or not trained properly and thoroughly, right? A rites of passage program could help prepare them for the seminal act of independence, which is to get their own car or their own access to a car, and then they can leave and navigate the broader society without the watchful eyes of parents, which had been the pattern for the most part prior to them beginning to drive. And this definitely lines up with puberty. It's the onset of the warrior class, which is the physical stage of obsession that's consistent with any human sort of clock. And this is a time to get in front of them and to put some expectations in front of them and to hold them accountable to things that the family determine and deem critically important from a value construct. Okay. They're also at this time, hopefully, still willing to listen because the rites of passage program will require a humbling, will require a set at the feet posture, will require an openness and a directive guidance for the young person. And they're still at that age set where they're willing to listen, to be taught, to go through a process, even if they don't quite understand holistically what the outcome may be. If it's done in an organized, structured way with people they know that care for them, they're willing to acquiesce to it and to kind of take advantage of it. So that's kind of the why, y'all. That's the why and the when I'm recommending for biracial families or parents or interracial parents. If you're thinking about identity, if you're thinking about identity in the way that I was and kind of how I oriented my 6 children who are biracially presenting, they have a black mother, a biracial father. We kind of oriented them more towards a black identity and sense of self and cultural centeredness. But if you are a part of the increasing multicultural, multi-generational, light-skinned, biracial community, and maybe you're looking at different ways in which you want to raise your beautiful seeds, a rites of passage can still be a construct. It just would shape differently in what you expose them to in terms of the lessons and the educational component, which will be the subject matter of part 2, which I'll do probably in another couple of days. Part 1 was what are rites of passage and what purpose they serve. Part 2 will be the initiation ceremony, how you can set it up, how you can tee it up. And then the third part will be mental and physical challenges, which are critically important because they, again, give your beautiful sons a sense of accomplishment, which is the precursor to confidence. The high confidence leads to a high sense of self-esteem, and it's this esteem that propels them forward in the broader society. So I'm not seeing any questions in the box. So just wanted to kind of chop with you a little bit. Tune in for part 2 and also go to the page and check out some other conversations there dealing with biracial growth and identity. Thank you guys so much.